Hello, Jody Wolf, and you're watching Expoz, December 16, 2018. It's 12:26 a.m. Birmingham. And topic, everything that's going to come against us is already in place. And this is very interesting to know. And I watched several clips of David Wilcock and interviewing Corey Good. If I'm not mistaken, this Corey guy was age 13 when he signed on. Now, I don't know what family he's from, but signed on with what we would call today the NSA. And this man is older than I am now, and I don't know how old. I think he's about 6 or 7 years older than myself, which make him 77 to 80 years old. And what I want to tell you is the very first thing that they did to him was to teach him how to hide. I know it seems crazy. They put him on, and I forget what kind of airplane it was, a DC-10. That seems like it's ringing a bell, a DC-10. He said, that'll tell you how old I am. So we're thinking about back in the 50s and 60s, or maybe late 50s. Now, the point I want to get to is where he named off a lot of names, a lot of people that we would know today as people who were on the up and were in good faith, good standing, and good people within our nation and owners of large companies. And he named several, but one stuck out. He said, I went, and he said, I was 13 when I signed on, and I had to swear, and how he got in at this age, and unless his parents or dad was in it, it was not explained on this. And it's David Wilcock update, December 15, 2018. And there's several parts to this, but it's him and Corey Good. And so here's what he did. When they flew him in on this, I think, DC-10, if I'm wrong, you kind of know where I'm going. I think it's a twin engine, rotary engine aircraft. And flew him, and I don't know where they flew him. It seemed like it was Pennsylvania. Maybe it wasn't, but to the Polaroid Corporation, Polaroid camera. You've heard of that. And the owner, the inventor of Polaroid. Well, what's amazing, this guy is a mathematical genius. Very intelligent. Not only that, he knew everything there was to know about components and about, well, for example, he said what they used in the trade towers, the reason when those buildings fell, the reason there was only 4 floors, he said the rest of it was blown to dust that settled out over Manhattan over 4 inches. He said that's where all the buildings went to. And every scoop, if you would pick it up with a spoon, there'd be 1,000 particles in there of this type of explosive that would cause it to turn to dust. He said the steel they shipped off to China. He said, why, when the steel price is at the lowest point, it cost them more to ship it than money they made on it. So this is where the guy's going. He's talking about these things. He said, now, when we went into Iraq, he said, we pulled stealth F-35s out of the mothballs. And David said, what do you mean the mothballs? Aren't these things brand new? He said, they were in mothballs 20 years before we ever used them. Wow, can you believe that? This is what the man said. He said, so technology is way more advanced than you think it is, even today in 2018 right here. He's way more in advanced than you think it is. And I've heard that many times. So what he was telling this crew, these people who came, he was about to train them. Corey Good said, the first thing he said, I'm here to tell you, we're not talking about pictures, and we're not going to talk about cameras. That's not what we're about. He said, we're going to talk about how to hide. So he showed them films, and he carried them to actual locations after watching the films. And this is training that went on for a long time. I would think months and months, and even this man, Corey Good, trained over many years. He said training never stopped. So when they watched these videos, and then they carried them out into an open area, there's a body of water like a lake, and across the lake, he said 300 yards. He said, we're here. And he said, okay, now tell me what you see across over there. Well, trees, pines, a few little shrubbery. He said, look really good. And he looked, couldn't see anything. Gave him binoculars. They looked, couldn't see a thing. He said, okay. And he said, Sergeant. And there was a sergeant there. And the sergeant took a whistle or something and blew it. And then everything across the water moved out of its place and stood at attention. He said there was an entire hillside of snipers and of people with shoulder launchers, an entire hillside of them. He said, I'm not talking about 2 or 3, I'm talking about hundreds that was embedded in that hillside we were looking at that you couldn't see. He said they would take a net, like a fish net, and it would have a 1/2-inch squares in it. And they would wire in and interweave into it limbs, whether it looked like a fallen tree, and there would be 2 or 3 standing side by side that would resemble that fallen tree. And others are standing upright. Others are sitting down. They look like bushes, but they would make themselves invisible. He said, the point to this is all the invisible things there in your wide open view that you don't see today. He said, they are there. He said, the enemy is there. He said, you don't see them. And again, he talked about the Twin Towers, talked about who was responsible for destroying the towers and how many years in advance they were planned to be destroyed. He said the columns in the basements were drilled and packed tight with this explosive. He said 20, 30 years ago. He said on the way up, he said the same thing in the structural part of it. He said it was a contained drop of a building. He said in the explosives that they were used was embedded so deeply that it turned all the steel in that building into tiny pinhead sized drops of steel with a bit of that explosive attached to it. He said a spoonful would have thousands of little dots of the explosive along with the metal. He said that's why Manhattan was covered in 4 inches of the Twin Towers and everything that was in them. They were turned into powder. He said there's so many things around this planet, in this country, that would scare the hell out of us. He said, I can't begin to tell you. He said, and I can talk now because of the length of time I've been out and because of the things that has already been made known to you all. He said a lot of people don't believe what they're hearing. And I think WILCOCK mentioned like the Twin Towers. He is exactly like the Twin Towers. He said that was a doorway to get into Iran, to start a war with Iran. Not Iraq, but with Iran. And I don't know why, but that's what he was said. That's what was said. And what I told you there, David WILCOCK update, December 15th, 2018, part 1. When you go and start watching these, prepare to hear things that you really don't want to hear. And, but I just want to tell you that things, and what I did on my last blog, the things that'll come before the final 7 years will begin, they're here. They're just not exposed yet. Remember me telling you that? They're here. The AI is here. Everything is in place. They're just, you gotta wait for somebody to blow that whistle for everything to start. And that includes the evil that's going to come up out of the ground. People are seeing these things. I'm going to tell you one more quick thing and cut it. And this happened in Canada, between, like on the Canada-Alaskan border, and like 300 miles inland from the water, the Pacific. There was a guy doing some training and watching from a distance a portal there. And he said the portal just formed, just opened up. He said, and intelligence told us it was there. And we were there to see it and verify it and several things. He said he saw leathery winged, ugly beings flying in and out of that portal. He said it terrified him. He said looked like things, and they were big. He said looked like they'd simply tear anyone apart. Does this resemble the kinds of things that the Native Americans in out west are seeing from time to time? Sounds like exactly what they're seeing there. When a wolf, giant wolf, can run fast as a car can drive, and when it takes a leap, he jumps 100 feet up per leap. You know, but these things, leathery wings, ugly creatures flying in and out of this portal that formed on the spot. So he said, they're there. You just don't see them. But with a very trained eye, he said it would blow your mind as to what you could see. He said, and that's what we were trained to do. And I'll end it there because there's a lot more to it that you'll want to hear. Jody Wolf Expoz.